Hi guys. So we've been looking at a couple of concepts on budgeting. I remember we've looked at the introduction to budget and we've looked at the different types of budgeting, and likewise we looked at the process that you have to follow in order to set a budget. Having done that, it's time to move forward on even how to estimate those values in budgeting. Right. So what are those values that we're talking about? We're talking about putting values to things like fixed cost, variable cost. So we should talk about fixed cost, variable cost, even total cost, which is the addition of both. Likewise, what about activity level, quantity? How much do we want to produce? So we're talking about activity level. Yeah, that's talking about quantity. And likewise, even how many hours do we need to spend on labor? So all of this, we need all this information when we do budgeting. We need to know all of this. So the question is, how do we use our understanding of budgeting to come up with those values? And that's why we need to learn various methods to do that. So we're going to be looking at various quantitative approaches. So I'll call it quantitative techniques. And there are 4 of them that we're going to learn as required in the syllabus. The first one is the high and low method. We'll also look at linear regression. And we will look at time series. And lastly, learning curve. So these 4 quantitative approaches, we will study them and I'm going to solve questions on them. In terms of popularity, this one, and this one, very popular for exams. Maybe hardly you find time series, but I'm still going to go through that. Yeah, because you have to be comfortable with that. So we'll start with the first one, which is the high and low method. Yeah. So the first one is high and low method. Right? And here, what is this used for? That's the first thing you need to understand. The purpose of this one is to separate total cost into variable costs and fixed costs. So this is used to separate total cost into fixed costs, the portion that is fixed, and the portion that is variable. That is what this method is used for. And the best way to do it is to use an example, which I'm going to use this data to solve. This data you have here. Yeah, we're going to use this data at the point. Right. But quickly, let's understand what is this talking about. So this is leveraging on the straight line equation, which is y equals to mx plus c. Remember, we've used this before, right? When we're talking about CVP analysis, we're back at it again. Yeah, this is a general equation of a line, right? And why is this so? What this is saying is that when y is the total cost, right? X is the quantity produced, that is your activity level. And if C is the fixed cost, then your M, which is slope, is your variable cost. So what this equation is saying is that your total cost is actually equals to your total variable cost plus fixed cost, which you agree. Yeah, because the total variable cost is the same thing as multiplying variable cost per unit, which is this slope, multiplied by Q, which is the quantity produced, plus fixed cost. That is what the equation is looking at. And that is what high and low method is trying to leverage on. Because if you look at this slope of M, in mathematics, your slope is actually calculated as y2 minus y1. Excuse me. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. What this is saying is that if you plot a graph now, yeah, and we say this is activity level on x-axis, and it's activity level that determines the total cost, yeah, on y-axis. Then what we are saying is that usually we will expect this kind of graph, straight line graph. It's a straight line relationship because when activity is 0, then the cost will be fixed cost at this point, yeah. And this line is our equation line, which is, if you find the slope of this line, you will see that this is y2 and this is y1. So this is y2 here, and likewise the x2 is here, and likewise x1 is here. So to calculate the slope of this line is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which is what we are now leveraging on to say that means our variable cost is actually equal to the highest level of y, yeah, which is the high level, minus low level of y, divided by likewise the high level of x minus low level of x. That is invariably what we're trying to work out. And if we quickly use this example that I have here, now how is this applied in forecasting? We need to know the total cost for July, which we don't have. We've been given for January to June, but we don't know what July total cost will be. And we want to use high-low method. All we need to do is, first of all, to calculate. So step 1 is to calculate the slope of the graph, which is the variable cost per unit, using your high-low method. And that's why you need to ask yourself, the highest point is here, this is high, and this is the lowest level of activity, right? So, and you know total cost is your y-axis, and output is your x-axis, which is the quantity. So which means y2, and that is 2300, I minus low y, which is 1050, divided by 900 minus 400. And that gives us, that is, if you divide that, you have 2.5. So we've used the highest and lowest level of activity and their respective cost to determine our variable cost. The next step, which is step 2, is to calculate the fixed cost. Yeah, so what you must always do is to use the high level. Please take note. So always use your high level to determine the fixed cost. And at high level, we have quantity to be 900. Remember, Q is 900 and total cost is 2300. And we know that total cost is equals to fixed cost plus variable cost per unit times quantity. So which means our total cost of 2300 is equals to fixed cost that we want to calculate plus we already know variable cost to be 2.5 multiplied by quantity is at 900. And with this, we have fixed cost that will be equals to 2300 minus 2250. And that will give us $50. So using high and low method, our fixed cost is $50. Then lastly, we can determine the equation of the production. So the last stage is to determine the equation of production cost. Yeah, and that is, remember, total cost will now be equals to fixed cost of 50 plus variable cost of 2.5 multiplied by the quantity. So with this equation, we can estimate any total cost at any given activity level. So now that July activity level is 850, all we have to do is to plug that in here and we'll be able to get the total cost for July. And that will be equals to 50 plus 2.5 multiplied by 850. That equals to 50 plus 2.5 times 850. That's 2125. And that equals to 2175. So that's the total cost for July. And it's as simple as that. That is how the high and low method is being used. And I hope that is clear. It's not beyond that. Remember, 3 steps: determine your variable cost per unit, determine your fixed cost, and come up with the equation. With this equation, you are home and dry, and there is no total cost that you cannot predict.